Thank you for participating in our Stakeholders webinar series. The Greene County Planning and Zoning staff is beginning the process of changing our zoning ordinances. Staff has created this webinar series in-house instead of using an outside consultant because we want the zoning ordinance revisions to be a reflection of the local community. As property owners, business owners, and project developers, you have local knowledge and experience that is critical to developing a successful and realistic plan. Through the Comprehensive Plan and Ruckersville Small Area Plan, the citizens have asked that the zoning focus changes from a traditional approach of separating uses and structures to an approach that creates an interconnected, accessible community center that builds a sense of place. Staff has created this webinar series to show the existing conditions, the potential scope or study area where the new regulations will be implemented, and to share and receive ideas regarding how to create the desired sense of place. This is the third and final in a series of 3 short webinars, and it focuses on creating regulations. The first webinar reviews the history and local zoning and the proposed study area, and the second highlights the existing conditions and community vision. The citizen groups participating in the Comprehensive Plan and the Ruckersville Small Area Plan identified the desire to have a planned community center that creates a sense of place in the Ruckersville corridor. In order to accomplish this goal, it was recommended that the county revise the zoning ordinance regulations to help encourage the development of a mixed-use center. As discussed in the previous webinars, a sense of place describes our relationship with places that we experience. It can encompass various aspects of human life, such as emotions, imagination, personal experience, and attachments based on those interactions. This requires focusing on how each part fits into the overall community plan rather than the concurrent traditional zoning approach that separates each land use and treats each parcel independently. As communities are created, there are many influences on the sense of place. Activities that allow the community to explore and experience places together at a human scale could contribute to the developing of a collective sense of place. How a neighborhood or social network functions creates a sense of place. How all modes of transportation function together creates a sense of place. How trails, parks, and green spaces bring community members together also creates a sense of place. The primary goal of creating or amending the existing regulations is to create a collective sense of place in Ruckersville. As discussed in the first webinar, the early stages of zoning began with separating land uses. Cities and populations were expanding, and to help alleviate nuisances to the residences, such as odor, sound, light, and pollution, conflicting uses were separated into different zones. This form of zoning is labeled conventional or Euclidean zoning. As zoning evolved, Euclidean zoning was expanded further to address more intensive uses and/or to provide benefits to the community. Incentive and performance regulations were incorporated into conventional zoning. As the county or the country grew as a result of the Industrial Revolution, the cost of sprawl began to take a toll on communities. Communities responded by developing other regulations that differ from conventional zoning, such as form-based zoning and smart growth. Some localities choose to use a cross-disciplinary approach and create hybrid codes that would support the goals outlined in the Comprehensive Plan. Conventional zoning is primarily focused on what happens inside the buildings, the uses. That's how different zones are often named after the allowed use. For example, single-family residential, multifamily residential, industrial, or retail/commercial. With such zoning, the quality, scale, character, and design of buildings and blocks, which are so important for creating a sense of place, take a back seat to what's happening inside the buildings and often aren't even considered at all. The character of streets and other public spaces around the development is usually never addressed. Most conventional zoning fails to encourage interconnected, walkable, mixed-use development because its design is to separate uses. A form-based code, on the other hand, focuses first on the shape and scale of the buildings and blocks, as well as the features of the streets and other public spaces. And because a form-based code starts with a community vision or plan, these codes are more likely to preserve the features and character that community members cherish. They also encourage the mix of uses and walkability that is so important to creating a sense of place. As discussed in the first webinar, there are many features that can create a sense of place. Using community-specific features can create an integrated, connected place to work, live, and play. The following example shows how a transportation corridor can develop over time using regulations that focus on how the development creates a sense of place. This step shows how adding some landscape planting and road design features begins to create a sense of place. In this example, infill development is scaled to the street by changing the build-to line and adding street lamps and placing the utilities underground. Finally, this slide shows the addition of specific tree planting and the impact on the corridor appearance. This next example shows the redevelopment of an existing strip-style shopping center with a focus on creating a sense of place. This redevelopment is designed to create a walkable community center rather than focusing on technical specifications. Landscaping, pedestrian walkways, street parking, and architectural features can all be used to create a sense of place. Density and building height can also be used to create a community center. The Ruckersville Area Plan recommended using design overlay areas, landscaping standards, industrial and commercial overlay areas, and consistency and clarity on all requirements and uses as zoning regulation changes needed to encourage the goals of creating an integrated, defined community center. There are many organizing principles that will guide how the new regulations are enacted. Please review the list of concepts and provide feedback or comments. Please add any additional thoughts in your responses. The purpose of this webinar series is to receive input on how Greene can develop a community-based action plan to achieve the goals outlined in the comprehensive plan. We want your feedback. This list of questions is just a conversation starter. Please add any thoughts you may have. All input is welcome. Please use the following contact information to share your ideas. We cannot develop a successful community-based plan without your input. Thank you for taking time to participate. There are 2 more short webinars preceding this, and they cover the history of local zoning in the proposed study area and the existing conditions and community vision. Once the data is collected from the webinar responses and compiled, we will host public sessions to discuss the results and create a plan for revising the zoning regulations.